It's not a bad temporary circuit. It's just as good as many of the permanent tracks we go to with the Grand Prix circuit. Well, umbrellas are going down, tyre warmers are coming off, engines are being started again, and there's one very angry person at the moment in that control tower, and that's Ken Tyrrell, John.
He was remonstrating fairly vigorously with Roland Brunserada about not having his man, Mr. Katayama, put back onto his grid position. Tyrrell, of course, had seen that Martin Brundle's Ligier Renault was brought back up to its original start position at the first restart. At the minute, we understand Katayama's car to be still in its original position, but let's have a look and see if we can tell as the cars file past for the third time. The bravest man here in Adelaide, the Channel 9 cameraman who stands in the middle of the track and just hopes that the people who are coming from the rear do see him. Well, Katayama is still at the back of the grid alongside Ulsterman Eddie Irvine, who overshot his grid position, and his penalty is go back to jail and don't pass go on the way through.
Don't collect your money, isn't it?
All the money.
Well, Senna leading the field. On the parade lap, the third parade lap we've had so far in Adelaide. The first start being cancelled because of Katayama stalling the engine. The second start being abandoned because Eddie Irvine overshooting his original place on the grid. Now, John, it's going to be very interesting and maybe even a little bit hazardous in that very first chicane, but also the hairpin at the end of this straight.
Well, everybody will be having the jitters right now because they've had, effectively, this is the third start we're coming up to, and all that tension, you can sometimes overrule judgment. The first chicane for me is the principal area of trouble. By the time they reach the end of the Brabham Straight on the first flying lap, certainly the front lines, first three rows of the grid will be fairly well spaced out. But there will obviously be somebody who will take his heart in his mouth and think, oh, there's a gap down the inside. Wallop, down they go. They put the brakes on to discover a part of the track that is very dusty and very dirty. But just looking around the circuit as the cars are making their parade lap, there's quite a lot of paper debris around the circuit. Now that's another factor that drivers have got to be conscious of, because the more that can get into those radiator air boxes, the higher your temperature is going to go. So don't be surprised to see pit stop taking slightly longer, because there will be somebody sticking his hand in each of the two radiator air boxes to ensure the cooling of the engines is optimized.
Riding with Damon Hill and now with Michael Schumacher. The guys on the second row of the grid, and Schumacher already having a lot of oil on his helmet. So whichever car he was following, that was losing some oil.
Well, that was Alain Prost, but of course it isn't unknown for teams to, let's say, use rules to their advantage and somewhat overfill the oil tank and allow the overflow, the natural overflow, to go out through the breather, and the car that is following obviously gets covered in oil, but principally the driver's visor.
The 5-second board's up. The red light is on, and we are on our way for the very last Grand Prix of the year, and a very good start by Alain Prost. Is he going to make it past? But it's Damon Hill who's having a look, and it is Senna leading, Prost leading Damon Hill, and behind a very good start from and there was Pedrolami off.
And also Rubens Barrichello had to dive over the curb on the left-hand side, and poor Pedrolami in his first Australian Grand Prix looks like it has ended in the first chicane.
And I was going to say, very good start from Martin Brundle.
But I will say that there was a small amount of creep from Alain Prost before the lights went to green. Whether it's enough for the stewards here to consider it was a jump start, I don't know. But if we see the replay, certainly for where our position is, we're almost directly above the, there we see it. Well, that's a little bit late.
A very good start from Damon Hill. Went for the gap in the middle, but then decided against it. Decided to go for a safe third place. But look behind that. What's happened there? There's yellow on the curbs, and it was Katayama who tried to do the tricky one.
And Eddie Irvine, four wheels on the dirt on the exit from the chicane. Now this is the normal, what I would call concertina effect. The cars at the back are still accelerating as the cars immediately ahead of them are hard on the brakes. Irvine forced way out to the left, had to get on the grass, and we wait now for the completion of the first lap. But one thing that is clear, Ayrton Senna has pulled out at least a second and a half lead over Alain Prost, waved yellow flags, so there will be no overtaking because there is Pedro Lapis Lotus. They have not been able to pull it out of the way.
This is very much a safety car situation, John. The car is in the middle of the track. Well, we see the top 6 on our screen, but well, if the marshals can't get it away, then I think they are going to put the safety car out. Well, let's just wait and see what happens.
Well, I suspect that Lemmy's car is stuck in gear, but now they've got probably just about a minute to try and get that car manhandled to safety and allow those yellow flags to be brought in. And there will be a few people who will try and outbrake into the first chicane, but you've got to be really alongside as you come past start-finish line to have any hope at all of taking that place.
So Ayrton Senna leads at the end of Brabham Straight on lap 2. Alain Prost is second. Then it's Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher. Behind Schumacher there's a gap to Gerhard Berger, who's got Martin Brundle right behind him. And we're on our way back to start-finish. And oh, that's a chase car, sorry, coming into the pits. So Ayrton Senna completes lap 2 out of 79. And well, the Lotus is gone. Well done, Marshall.
Yes, it was very good work indeed by all the marshals. They come from all over Australia to work here in this Grand Prix, and they've cleared the track, and everything is fine.
Actually, John, I think not only all over Australia, there's a lot of marshals coming from all over the world, and they treat it like a bit of a holiday as well.
I'm not surprised. It's a wonderful place to come for a holiday. And it's a Grand Prix, it's a holiday atmosphere here in Adelaide anyway. It always has been that for the Australian Grand Prix, and a fitting way, I feel, for the season to end.
Ayrton Senna was half a second quicker than Alain Prost on the second lap, and I suppose what Ayrton wants to do, John, is get as big a gap as possible, as quick as possible.
The thing I'm not clear about, and we won't know really until we're some 20 or possibly 30 laps into this race, is what is the strategy McLaren are going to adopt. Looking back at Japan, it was clear that McLaren were going to go for 2 tyre stops, and Williams, particularly for Alain Prost, only 1. Now, whether McLaren will apply or adopt that strategy in Adelaide isn't clear. Certainly they're not going to come and tell us, John or Allard, this is what we're going to do. Senna will want to open up as big a gap as quickly as possible, because he knows that when he begins to come up against the back markers, he does not want to have the same kind of problem that he was confronted with in Japan.
Another man who did not have a very good first couple of laps is Riccardo Patrese, who's dropped down to 12th position. And the gap now between Senna and Prost is 2.5 seconds, but this is an interesting battle. Oh, Schumacher.
Well, Schumacher's got a lot of oil. We mentioned it before the race started. There's a lot of oil on Schumacher's helmet. That's, I suspect, coming out from the rear of Damon Hill's Williams Renault. He certainly made an error going into East Terrace onto Hutt Street. And you can see how much he has dropped back from the rear of Damon Hill.
Well, and Ayrton Senna is really putting his foot down. He's got a big lead over Alain Prost at the moment, and there you can see the oil on Michael Schumacher's helmet. This comes out of Damon Hill's car, I suppose, John.
It's a question of just too much oil in the oil tank, and again Schumacher in all sorts of problems coming on to pit straight. The back end of the car steps out very quickly indeed, has to balance it on the throttle before he can get back hard on it. Now that was a little error we saw from Schumacher. We've seen those throughout the weekend. He had a little spin just here in the warm-up this morning. What he needs to do now is just compose himself, settle down again, and then build up his attack on Damon Hill if he has any hope at all of applying pressures for third place.
A couple of tenths of a second, Ayrton Senna is faster than Alain Prost, and that lap after lap. And here we go with the Ford telemetry. We see the revs, we see the accelerator, the speed, bottom right, and the gear we're in. And Let's see what top speed is here, 280 to 92, 292 kilometers an hour.
Well, in fact, this morning his quickest speed down the straight was 291, so telemetry is pretty accurate.
And it's real time as well. I think it's also, John, now we're going on to the straight. Let's see what this accelerator does.
Well, it'll be pretty much flat out, and only when that green bar you see any change will be when the engine does the gear change for the driver. His foot just remains flat on the throttle, and it is all done by the onboard Ford computer.
Incidentally, Michael Schumacher just posting a new fastest lap of the race, a 1:18.466.
Well, he certainly recomposed himself, because he had that one bad lap when he overran behind Damon Hill. He dropped back, he caught his breath literally and metaphorically, and then he picked up the pace, and he's closing down the gap, some 1.2 seconds between himself and Damon Hill.
We've just seen the top 6 on our screen. We're on lap 6 out of 79 here in Adelaide. Please rejoin us here on Eurosport after the break. Welcome back here in Adelaide. The Australian Grand Prix and a new fastest lap by Michael Schumacher. A 1:17.0, and that's a full second faster than the previous fastest lap. So Michael Schumacher and his new tires, that definitely works. John, is that the strategy that is going to win Michael Schumacher his third Grand Prix victory?
It's a good gamble. I think that a Ford engine team probably had to take that gamble. I would have expected McLaren to do likewise. It depends really on tyre wear, the protections that Goodyear would have provided each team with. Certainly Michael Schumacher would be slightly more aggressive on his tyres than race leader Ayrton Senna is. We have to wait and see. Senna certainly has gone past the point where he would probably be considering coming in for a first stop for tyres. He's got a lead, currently back to 2.8 seconds, but that's because of traffic. He's now into the heart of the back markers. Alain Prost, you can see the gap as they went past here on the start of the 19th lap was 2.8 seconds. It certainly looks less than that. But of course Prost now has to make his way past Andrea de Cesaris, who currently runs in 16th place.
The Cesaris should get out of the way before the chicane. Let Prost get past down the main straight. Oh, that Yamaha engine seems to be pretty effective these days.
The Yamaha engine is not a bad engine at all, and you could see in acceleration Alain Prost did not really have any significant advantage, and now Andrea not being as friendly maybe as he might have been, but and again a big fistful of opposite locks as Andrea got those Yamaha horsepowers through to the rear tyres. But that's cost Alain Prost time, the gap 3 seconds, and I'm sure by the end of this, the 20th lap, it will in fact be more than that.
Race leader Ayrton Senna driving on to Brabham Straight, and look at the rubber that's down on this circuit. I mean, there's no way you want to drive on that piece of that part of the circuit, do you?
The circuit is more and more treacherous as the race goes on. More rubber is shred from the tyres. The line that is available, in other words, the opportunities to pass become greatly reduced. But Michael Schumacher has stopped on the circuit, and it looks like it is all over for Benetton and Schumacher. Great disappointment, because he was the man we were looking to inject some excitement into the front of the grid. He stopped early for tyres. He was the quickest man on the race by over a second, and his race is over and finished. And well, Schumacher and Benetton will be feeling more than disappointed.
Michael Schumacher is not having a happy end to this Grand Prix season. He did not finish in Japan because of a little coming together with Damon Hill, and he does not finish the Australian Grand Prix. We don't know what it is. There's a lot of smoke coming from one side of that engine, and the car is very safely parked down, just before Brabham Straight.
Yes, down in the middle of Jones Strait, just before that very quick kink you see there, and it's so easy on the exit through that kink to ride over the curbs on the left-hand side.
There we see the top 6, and now Mika Hakkinen is up to 4th position. 20 seconds behind Damon Hill. Then it's Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger. Both the Ferraris, you can see them behind the caption, are in the points, but it is Jean Alesi who's passed his teammate on the previous lap. So Gerhard could well be the one going on one stop maybe, John. Or maybe no stop at all, because he's pacing himself around the 1 minute 20 second bracket.
Well, Gerhard traditionally is one of the first people to stop for tyres, partly because of the way he likes the car to be set up and he likes to drive, and also because he feels that making early stops sometimes works to his advantage. But certainly of the two Ferraris, Alesi this afternoon is finally past Gerhard Berger and pulling away very quickly indeed. But Ferrari pits do have a set of tyres on pit lane, and they're bringing out the fronts. And I just wonder, are those, in fact they're pushing away a set of tyres. I wonder whether they've decided to go with a different compound. They've been trying C's and D's. Everybody, we believe, did start on D's. A couple may have taken a risk in C's, and that could be the reason why Berger's lap times and his pace correspondingly is that little bit off of Jean Alesi.
The gap between Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost currently 3.4 seconds, and there we see Mika Hakkinen. Lost out on the start, but is in fourth place, and Jean-Marc Counon is off. Jean-Marc Counon is off the circuit. He ran onto the curbs going into this kink, and actually it's something Mika Hakkinen was talking about in a press conference earlier in the week. He said, those curbs, he says, I don't like them, because if you just touch them, you get caught on them and you spin off.
I think what Mika is saying is, Damon Hill is the first of the two Williams into the pits. And now, clock starts.
That is a very good start by the Williams team. 6.4 seconds. Damon in and out of the pits. Has he lost the position? No, he hasn't. He is still in front of Mika Hakkinen. So good work by the Williams team. Damon Hill still in third position.
As maximum attack from Mika Hakkinen as they went down into Wakefield Corner. But of course, Gerhard Berger, his Ferrari in the pits. And this is, I think, a change of compound for Berger from that he chose to start the race on. 5.83, quicker than the Williams team by half a second. And he rejoins just ahead of Karl Wendlinger in 7th place.
So Berger out of the points again. Also in and out of the pits was Martin Brundle, who made his first tyre stop, lap 22. And John, we're talking to people from Goodyear earlier on, and they said they would expect tyre stops around lap 30 to 35. Well, it didn't work that way.
Inevitably, any projections are going to be slightly different because race day and the weather this afternoon is different to that, particularly from this morning when it was a lot cooler, and from Friday morning or Saturday morning. Those are the periods when teams might choose to do a little bit of comparative running on the different compounds available. Certainly Saturday morning is when they will do principal full tank running.
Ayrton Senna is gonna go into the pits, I think, at the end of this lap. The team is ready for him, and while Alain Prost goes past Toshio Suzuki, the man who is being lapped again, the gap is still 2.9 seconds. Well, let's see what happens. Is Senna going to come into the pits, or is it actually Mika Hakkinen? What would you do?
Well, in my mind, the team would let Mika Hakkinen come in first. They would have a very quick look at his tyres and judge the situation.
Hakkinen's past Damon Hill.
Well, I'm not surprised. I thought that might have happened as Damon came out of the pits just ahead of Hakkinen. Mika was, as I said, in maximum attack mode, and I think he got past Damon Hill into Wakefield Corner. All the signals were there that he was going to do that. The Treasury joins just ahead of Barrichello, and Senna, you're right, is the first of the two McLarens in for this very, very crucial, what may be a single stop, I suspect, a two-stop race for Ayrton Senna.
So, Senna, 5.3 seconds. He has lost the lead to Alain Prost, but for how long? Ayrton Senna in second place, and John, I suppose Prost has got to come into the pits now.
Well, depends. It just depends on how much pace Ayrton Senna is going to pick up. But we saw what Schumacher did instantly, over a second advantage, and Mika Hakkinen still holding on to that third place. Damon Hill looking to go down the inside. Hakkinen denies it, and Damon recognised it. He very wisely turned a bit early to the right to give Hakkinen that room. No mercy, my son, none at all.
But that's just a question of time, because Damon is the quicker of the two, and he will take Mika Hakkinen maybe the end of Brabham Straight.
He'll take him, and Hakkinen has a stop. Even with the
fight, though.
Yes, it's a great fight, and it's good to see. This is what Formula One really is trying to demonstrate, that there is good motor racing going on. But even with the advantage of horsepower, Damon looking, and he just at the very end of the straight has got an advantage. But he needs to be closer to Hakkinen as they go through that kink onto the straight. The danger is if he's too close, the downforce goes away, the front will wash out, he'll wash over the curb and lose even more ground. Hakkinen locking up brakes. Now, Damon, get on it. You've got the acceleration, you've got the power, use it.
Oh, well done, Damon Hill. Is he going to go to get third place back? Yes, he is. A very good move.
Well, I hope Damon wasn't listening to me. I think he knows how to drive a race car, but you could see what Damon's mind was saying. He saw the locking of Hakkinen's brakes. He knew that if he got on the power quickly and cleanly and used all that Renault horsepower, he could get past. Good, aggressive and positive overtaking manoeuvre from Damon Hill.
So the gap between Alain Prost in the lead on lap 26 and Ayrton Senna in second place is 9.1 seconds. Then it is now Damon Hill, say roughly a further 4 seconds behind, 17 seconds behind, and Derek, that's not the way to do it.
Well, he's got back onto the circuit, and all he's done is give that underbelly of the car a bit of a shaving on those curbs, and he's back in the race, still in 10th place.
So Alain Prost doing laps 120.5, Ayrton Senna 119.1. I think both drivers are encountering traffic at the moment. The man we should keep an eye on at this stage of the race is Damon Hill. He should be the fastest of the cars out there. And there's Mika Hakkinen in the pits, and Damon running in the mid 119 bracket, but then he had to overtake Mika Hakkinen, of course.
With all the traffic on the circuit as well, everything is now being slightly confused, and the advantage that fresh tyres have for Senna, in fact, is not getting to its best advantage. Jean Alesi streaks out of the pits also, and this is not what Senna wanted. He wanted to get a clean run to attack Prost as much as he could on those fresh tyres. The pendulum has swung to Alain Prost's favour. The gap is 7.6 seconds. We're on the 27th lap of the race. Williams have got Prost's tyres on pit lane. They're still in their tyre warmers. Very shortly, I would anticipate, Alain Prost will be making his way into pit lane.
And then there'll be a one-stop race, I suppose.
Prost, I'm sure, will try and work that strategy. It'll depend on a number of factors. He will try and read it really lap by lap. But if anybody is capable of going through from lap 28 to 30, let's say, all the way for a further 49 laps, Alain Prost, your man.
Alain Prost having a lot of understeer there, going through that right-hander, and, well, the man is very precise indeed, but he might have to come in very soon to change his tyres. They might have just lost grip. Although Ayrton Senna is only 1/10 of a second faster so far.
Well, I think what Prost is doing really is not allowing himself to get drawn too closely to Patrese on the parts of the track where overtaking isn't possible anyway. And he's going to try and create the slingshot effect to pick up the draft from Patrese's car and get past on a part of the circuit where passing is easier. He's not quite close enough to do it. Well, that's the one point of the circuit I think Prost anticipated he could overtake Patrese. Patrese traditionally doesn't, let's say, acquiesce quite as much as other drivers might do. He felt that he was sufficiently far in front of Alain Prost at the end of the straight. Prost now will, I suspect, wait until he gets all the way back onto Jones Straight, unless Riccardo Patrese says, "Oh, sorry, Alain, look, I'm going to give you room to slide through."
And 18.8 was the lap time for Alain Prost, and for Ayrton Senna. Whoa, where's Senna gone? Ayrton Senna has passed, 7 seconds the gap half a second quicker again. So, Prost and Senna, they are battling for the lead. There's 7 seconds between them. And when is Prost going to make his tyre stop? You'll find out after the break here on Eurosport. There is problems for Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren pits. They're looking at the left rear. He came in very slow indeed. And that's a sad sign. Also, John, while we were in the commercial break, Alain Prost had his pit stop, and it wasn't a very good one. He's lost the lead to Ayrton Senna, and there is now a gap between Senna and Prost of 14.7 seconds.
Well, that's what Senna was hoping for. That would allow him to make his second pit stop and still get out, retaining the lead. But unfortunately, Mika Hakkinen came in very slowly. Left rear of the car, it looks like something in the drive shaft or in the hub, maybe a hub bearing, or possibly the left rear brake, but I suspect it's in the drive train on the left-hand side. Disappointment for Hakkinen, difficult start, clawed his way past, eventually did get ahead of Damon Hill, but Damon then once got past, and then Mika's pit stop for tyres. So looks like the end of a Grand Prix for Mika Hakkinen.
That's your leader, Ayrton Senna, leading Alain Prost, Damon Hill, Jean Alesi, Aguri Suzuki, and Gerhard Berger in 6th. Martin Brundle is in 7th position, just outside the points, in front of Carl Wendlinger and JJ Leto.
Now what Senna's going to be looking for is as much clear air as possible. Very shortly he's going to catch up to Riccardo Patrese, and then he's got the 2 Saibers ahead of that, so those are not going to be easy cars to pass. Senna's going to have to use all his wisdom in a car to make sure that he can get past in parts of the circuit where he's got an advantage, but not get delayed. And round here, for example, almost impossible to pass.
John, Damon Hill is currently the fastest driver on the circuit. Ayrton Senna is doing an 18.1, Alain Prost an 18.4, Damon Hill a 17.6. So maybe we should have a look at Damon Hill being the dark horse at this moment. But having said that, there's a long way to go. It's very hot, and we've seen quite a few mechanical retirements.
Typical of Adelaide. Everybody's tired when they come here. Sometimes some of the equipment that teams use isn't as fresh as they would have at the start of a season. And there we are, looking all the way back down the Brabham Straight. Mark Blundell, Derek Warwick, and there Alain Prost in 2nd place, 15 seconds behind the race leader, Ayrton Senna.
Of course, Damon Hill's out there to prove a point, John, that he's basically just as quick as Alain Prost. Which he is at the moment. He is 4.2 seconds behind, but he's a little quicker. 18.0 for Ayrton Senna, and I'm a little bit disappointed with those lap times. When Schumacher went out on his new set after the pit stop, he did that 17.0, which is still a second off his best that he put down last year, but they're not getting closer, are they?
Well, as I said, when Senna made his stop for fresh tyres, he got caught in traffic, and those initial 3 or 4 laps when the tyre is at its best, the advantage that he had with those tyres was lost in traffic. So now he's back to a much more stable position, and you're not going to see the kind of electric lap that you saw from Michael Schumacher after his very early stop.
Now the gap between Senna and Prost is coming down slowly, but it's got to come down much quicker for Alain to do something serious about.
Yes, but remember that it's Riccardo Patrese who's immediately ahead of Senna, not in terms of position, but just on the road, and that is not an easy car to pass. In terms of straight line performance, very little in it. In fact, this morning, if you look down the speeds in the straight, Senna was relatively slow at 176 miles an hour, whereas Patrese 2 miles an hour quicker. Doesn't sound a lot of difference in speed, but I tell you, it's a hell of a lot of difference when you're trying to get past a car that you want to put a lap on.
Now, it's funny that Ayrton Senna has suddenly done a 119.328. Don't know where that came from, but that is definitely very much slower than Alain Prost, who's just put his fastest lap to the race, which is a 117.6, and Damon Hill half a second a lap quicker than Prost.
And Damon Hill now has got Alain Prost very much in the sights. As we saw Prost entering East Terrace, you saw Damon Hill exiting from Wakefield Corner, and there is Damon Hill And they're now making their way down coming up to the little chicane at Hutt Street, all the way now on to Jones Strait. That's the shorter of the two main straights here in Adelaide, up to this very, very deceptive fourth gear kink. Stay off the curbs now, fifth, sixth gear.
So, John, when Damon sort of gets in there,
he gets on with the program.
Exactly.
Well, Damon Hill began his motorsport career on motorbikes. A term that's used in motorcycle racing is a scratcher. Now, Adelaide, in some ways, is a scratcher circuit. You've got to get in there, duck and dive and weave a bit. That's what Damon's doing. He's using, if you like, motorcycle experience on a Grand Prix circuit.
So, Senna back to the 118s on the 118.405. Prost the 118.5, and Damon Hill, the gap is now 2.4 seconds with Alain Prost. There's no team orders, and there we see Gerhard Berger making his way through traffic.
Not a lot of cooperation from Aguri Suzuki, but Berger is through cleanly. In fact, that footwork, Mugen was the quickest car down the straight this morning. It was doing 183 miles an hour, and Gerhard was second quickest in the straight this morning, 183.16. There was 0.2 of a mile an hour of difference. So Berger did work hard to overtake Aguri Suzuki.
Gerhard Berger in 5th position, and actually, John,
that was race 4 position.
That was race 4 position because Suzuki is back in 6th and Berger is up to 5th.
All's explained. You can understand why Aguri Suzuki defended as hard as he thought, as fairly as he thought, but Gerhard Berger at times is irrepressible, and he just sneaked through.
17 cars still running in this Grand Prix, and Ayrton Senna leads it by how many seconds? That's the question. Well, 13.1. Damon not closing very much on this lap. He is now behind Derek Warwick, who is a lap down, and will Derek let Damon go? Damon showing he's there, and he wants to get past that footwork as quick as he can, because he doesn't want the momentum to stop.
Well, all through these rights and lefts, this is where you will lose time. You can see Alain Prost just disappearing in front of him, and I think Damon is going to have to wait until they come on to Jones Strait. Oh, and a bit of a wobble from Warwick. Now Warwick will see clearly the blue nose of Damon Hill's Williams. You may well know from the helmet in his mirrors that it is Damon Hill. And now all the way down the straight, again, the speed of the Mugen engine, very impressive indeed. Damon's having to work hard to put a lap on Derek Warwick.
But Derek sort of lifted off when Damon was alongside. Very good.
That's intelligent race driving. He didn't lose any time in that. He maybe backed off a second at most before he would normally do, and that allowed Damon Hill to ease his way down, and allowed Damon also to get back onto line reasonably well and not have to go over the marbles and all the shredded rubber that is down in that hairpin bend, and continue his progress and his attack on Alain Prost.
Ayrton Senna, well, everybody's caught in traffic now. Senna back to doing 119s. Alain Prost behind Mark Blundell, and Damon Hill lost half a second over Alain Prost, being caught behind Derek Warwick. But now maybe Damon can get that back on this lap.
But Senna's got a problem. He's got JJ Leto and Carl Wendlinger ahead, and again the same problem is top speed. McLaren have gone for a race setup which is not optimizing on top speed. It's trying to capitalize on pole position, and that means they've got a little bit more downforce with their car this afternoon than maybe they would have run had they not been in pole position. Well done, JJ. You saw him. You raised your hand. You haven't lost position. You probably lost nothing. Andrea De Cesare is making up the point. Oh!
Yes, and there's Mark Blundell, held up Alain Prost for a long time. If Damon Hill can get past, and he can, he's right with the Frenchman. So Alain Prost has lost a lot of time behind Mark Blundell, and Damon Hill's caught up right with him. Now, John, also the crucial time difference has got to be between Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna is, let's say, roughly 11 seconds. And, well, Prost had it down to 11.9.
It's going to be down to traffic, Alan. I think the whole race is going to be strategy, using the traffic to your advantage and not getting caught out in it. you want to be sure that when you see a car ahead of you that you're about to lap, that you don't get caught in this part of the circuit. You want to try and judge your pace against that of the car ahead of you, but ensure that on the parts of the circuit where you have advantage or you've got the potential to overtake, you're in position to do so. Now we're watching Alain Prost and Damon Hill. Damon currently has been running quicker by over half a second on his teammate. A wave yellow flag, cars off to the right, and here we have a look again and we see probably what that situation is.
Oh, that's Gounod spinning off.
And that was a little heart-stopping moment, because the last thing you want to have in front of you as you're involved in a battle with your own teammate is that going on.
So Senna has got 13.2 seconds. We're on lap 38. Oh, we've just finished lap 38 out of 79. So, did I say right? There's still 40 laps to go. We're not even halfway yet.
11.2 seconds. The gap has reduced. Damon Hill, you can see it's 0.9 of a second, but in reality it's nothing. Now the danger, I think, for the Williams team is I don't think they want to have a battle between their two drivers. They want Prost to get as close as he can to Senna. They don't want to see Prost become embroiled in the battle with Damon Hill, and then the focus be taken away from Senna's lead and develop on these two cars. So I suspect that there may be communication via radio to Damon Hill that he is not to put pressure on Prost and not to distract Prost from his mission, which is to reduce Senna's lead. Well, we've just had there we see the marshal. Something blew onto the circuit. He ran to pick it up. In the course of doing so, his hat blew off. He ran all the way across the track. He then had to wait for another gap to run all the way back to pick up the offending part, as well as his hat. And I hate to see people on a racetrack during a Grand Prix.
Well, other than driving a car, you mean?
I think that's the case. Now, what I'm a little bit concerned about is who is going to be first to make the stop for their second set of tyres, Senna or Prost. I would like to see Senna make it first, because that will then, in my view, give him the final advantage for this final part of the Grand Prix. If Prost comes in first, he gets out cleanly. He won't have any interference from Ayrton Senna on his entry. That could swing the pendulum back again. But it's a great race, great strategy between both the two best drivers in the world and the two best teams in the world.
Yeah, the only thing that's a pity, John, is that they're not very close together on the racetrack, I suppose. Well, Senna did not come in on that lap, so Ayrton Senna is going to complete lap 48 out of 79. And his lap times are still in the middle to high, 1 minute 17. Alain Prost is about to car into the pits. Goes Alain Prost.
I think what Senna might be doing, Allard, is actually using the benefit of track, the clear track, to establish as much of a gap between himself and Prost as he can. And as soon as he comes up against serious back markers, 6.92, not brilliant, but clean, back out in the race, and that's Prost's final stop. But looking back at Senna, I suspect as soon as he has the hint of any traffic, he will then come in.
So Prost out on a fresh set of tyres. Damon Hill is not very far behind him. We saw Prost lose quite a lot of time on his outlap on his very first set of tyres.
The other thing to watch, Allard, is there are 20 laps to the end of this race. There's 29 seconds between Senna and Alain Prost. Is the gap, can it be closed by Prost on fresh tyres, or is Senna going to do something which we have seen him do many years before, take a calculated risk and stay with just one set? Again, it's a race about strategy between driver and pit communication, letting Senna know what Prost is doing, and Prost obviously getting clear signals from his pits on the speed that he is closing down Ayrton Senna.
Well, there we see Alain Prost, and Damon Hill has closed right up to him. Damon again close up to the back of Alain Prost, but the gap between Senna and Prost is now a very big one indeed. And I think, John, Again, Alain losing a lot of time on his outlap. Let's see what it is. Oh, 122.4, not too bad. But Damon, a 116.818. Smells blood.
Certainly does, but again, going back to what we said earlier, I don't imagine that Williams are going to allow a battle to develop between the two Williams drivers. Certainly right now on lap 49, Damon has the quickest race lap. Prost completed his first out lap in 1 minute 22.4. I expect that on this 50th lap we'll see significant improvement from Alain Prost, and well, you can see in fact that the gap appears already to be extending.
Let's just wait and see whether Ayrton Senna will come into the pits. He is got to come into side at any moment.
Well, looking down at the pits, Howard, I would say it's pretty clear to me that Senna is coming in very shortly. The man with the lollipop, that's the stick with the big red disc at the top of it which says stop, brakes on, brakes off. That tells the driver when the work is about to be complete. He is standing out at the limit. He is permitted, so as Senna makes his way down the pits. And the reason he's standing there is because the pit before McLaren is the Benetton pit. They're prepared for Riccardo Patrese likewise to make his second stop.
But Damon Hill, another 0.3 of a second faster on that lap than Alain Prost, getting closer and closer to the Frenchman. And now they are 2 seconds a lap faster than Ayrton Senna. So a battle for second place and also a strategy battle for the lead of this race. Well, John, we've seen quite surprise results, I suppose, here in Australia. Of course, we all remember the big Mansell tyre blow up when he lost the World Championship to Alain Prost. Keke Rosberg won here. Prost won in 86. Gerhard Berger in 87. And, of course, last year's winner. And Nelson Piquet won here alongside Thierry Boutsen. Did he win one of his Grand Prix here as well?
Indeed, a very, very wet Grand Prix, but a very fine win for Thierry Boutsen. He was absolutely wheel perfect on one of the most miserable days I think Adelaide has ever seen. And of course that was in a Williams Renault as well.
Riccardo Patrese is in the pits while Ayrton Senna has completed 51 laps so far, and the team doesn't seem to be bothered about changing tyres. They are still in the tyre warmers, so I suppose Ayrton will not come in very shortly. Well, look at this. Prost, a 126.126. That was fastest lap. Then Damon, a 116.115. So both drivers way quicker than anybody else at this moment. And Damon still quicker than Prost.
Well, the significant gap really is between first and second. And Gerhard Berger cruises into the Ferrari pits. And everybody there, you see there's the man with the lollipop. Once that's lifted, that means go. Whatever you feel, go.
Senna completed lap 52 on a 1:18.8. And with 27 laps to go, there is anything possible. 27 laps, and the gap between Senna and Prost, although there is quite a lot of traffic in between those two drivers, is something like 28.5 seconds. And Damon Hill, another new fastest lap, a 1:16.078, and that is very close. Actually, that equals the lap record.
Indeed it does. And Damon Hill looks like he's capable of going quicker. I'm sure if Damon didn't have the distraction of Alain Prost in front of him, he could actually go quicker. And well, Senna we see now rounding the hairpin bend for the 53rd time. The pit lane directly behind the McLaren pits is reasonably clear, but I must say the Benetton lollipop man standing for some reason far too far out, and that is slight distraction for the McLaren pits. They would like Benetton and Ferrari, who have recorded their second tyre stops, just to clear out and give Senna a much clearer run into his pit.
I think Ayrton will come in pretty soon, because now the tyre warmers are off the tyres. Well, we have a look at the top 12 on our screen. Senna, a 1:17.192. And of course, then we've got to wait for Alain Prost. There he is, right in front of us, because we are riding with Damon Hill, and Prost has got traffic ahead of him.
And just as we said, the tyre warmers came off. Senna's second set of tyres, they've been put back on again because he's completed yet another lap. On his 54th out of 79. Second place man, third place man, J.J. Later, who has been very cooperative so far in the race. Well, this part of the circuit, not so anxious to get offline. And this again is added torture. Alain Prost does not want to be delayed at all, and this is time lost. JJ slows down, lets Damon Hill and Alain Prost through. Damon really right on the gearbox, and I wonder, is Damon going to go for it? Is he going to take an opportunity, or is he going to sit back and do what I suspect he's been asked to do?
Damon Hill behind Alain Prost, who is behind LaRousse. Prost is going to go through. Is Damon going to go through as well? Yes, he is. So both the Williams are going through traffic quite cleanly. There's something on Damon's mirror, by the way. Bit of tape?
I think it's just a bit of tape. It's probably, in fact, somebody's rip-off that might have just got partially caught, and the wind pressure is holding it against the mirror. You see, under braking, Damon closes down on Alain Prost, but then in acceleration, the seesaw effect takes place again, and the gap between the two, 0.7 of a second.
And the gap between Senna and Prost is 29.2 seconds, so I think Ayrton is safe in making a pit stop. I also think Damon Hill is gonna go and try and wrench second place away from Alain Prost fairly soon, unless Prost again extends his lead again.
Well, it's just, I feel, very difficult for Damon to mount an attack, a serious challenge to Alain Prost. The team are here to win the Grand Prix. Alain Prost currently is better placed than Damon Hill to do that. So if you keep your two men more or less in control, and Ayrton Senna now is into the pits on the 55th lap, and this ought to be his final pit stop in the clock stops, brakes on. This is the crucial stop for McLaren, and out 5.02 seconds. Brilliant stop from McLaren men, and this, in my view, has been the winning play for this Australian Grand Prix.
John, if you'd have said before the year that Ayrton Senna was going to win 5 Grand Prix with McLaren?
With Senna, you can never predict what his potential is. The guy is absolutely remarkable. He certainly had a very controversial weekend here off the racetrack. In my view, he's certainly redressing those comments on the racetrack.
There we see the gap, 18.5 seconds between Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. And Prost is now caught behind Aguri Suzuki, who is not cooperative at all.
And once again, Alain Prost caught that part of the circuit up round Hutt Street onto Jones Straight, and you can see the difference in performance as they come up to this little flick right. Prost quicker through it, picks up the momentum. That's the slipstream off the back of Suzuki's car. But in sheer grunt terms, the Mugen V10 almost a match. Damon now also diving at the last minute and right under the rear wing of Alain Prost.
Damon is actually reading the traffic very well. I mean, Prost makes the gap, but he sort of goes with him with the flow, doesn't he?
He's certainly staying with him, but again, in many respects, it's slightly easier for Damon. He knows that Alain is not going to be incisive in overtaking the way other drivers are, and if Damon can stay close enough, he'll just slide through as well. This time, very difficult indeed, except that the Cheseris is running with a V9 or a V8 Yamaha engine rather than the traditional V10, so fairly easy for Damon to maintain station. I'm sure Alain Prost doesn't particularly like the attention he's getting from his much younger teammate, but on another hand, it's driving him on, it's pushing him on, it's keeping him honest.
And they're still 1.3 seconds a lap quicker than Ayrton Senna. The gap now 17.2 seconds. We're on lap 57 out of 79. And that's the difference between second and third place drivers. Coming up to lap, Carl Wendlinger, who is currently running in 7th position 4.7 seconds behind Martin Brundle, who is the fastest passive car in the field.
Well, hopefully at the end of this, the 57th lap, we'll find out just what the pace Senna has got on his second set of tyres.
16.6, John.
Well, that's pretty impressive.
I think that gap has widened again then.
I think it certainly has. And given a couple more laps, that's going to put Schumacher and Damon Hill's lap record close to jeopardy.
So Carl Wendlinger holding up Alain Prost a little bit, and John, this could be one of those moments that Damon could take advantage of the situation. If he can get close enough to Alain Prost down the straight, he might be able to slice through.
It just really depends what happens here on Jones Straight. If Alain Prost has got enough speed to get ahead of Wendlinger before the kink, which he hasn't, now this is the chance for Damon, if he wants to take it, to get close, not just to Carl Wendlinger, but use the slipstream off those two cars. He's now right under the gearbox of Alain Prost, but he again holds station. He's not challenging Alain Prost for that second place. Would have been a difficult move anyway. Prost had sufficient advantage into the corner. The gap to the right was very, very narrow. If you're racing for the lead in opposing teams, I'd have said, Damon, take the opportunity. As teammates and members of the Williams Renault team, that might have jeopardized second and third places. And remember, for Damon, he has to finish ahead of...
Carl Wendlinger, JJ Leto went straight on it. That chicane went straight up in the air, and sorry to interrupt Joe, but it was a spectacular off for JJ Leto, who's unhurt and parked his car, but gee, that could have been so much worse.
Well, if there'd been more traffic on that part of the circuit, that's what is always a problem in chicanes, where the circuit doubles behind. And I just saw a red light. I don't know whether that was just a reflection. There we see, JJ, well, oh dear me, did he ever nearly get into what we saw happen to Christian Fittipaldi back at Monza. The car got almost vertical in the air, and well, we don't know what the reason for that was. It could be brake problem, could be something with the throttle, whatever it was. A very exciting trip, and the worst thing for a driver in those situations is when you look forward, you're looking actually upwards, and all you see a cloud and sky. Not a pretty sight.
So JJ Leto retires, very spectacular, from this year's Australian Grand Prix. Alain Prost is still in second place. And look at Damon. Damon, of course, Barrichello was there, so Prost had to lift off a little early, and Prost has now got a problem. No, Damon might have a problem. Is there still yellow flags? There's no yellow flags, so Prost goes through. Damon's got to wait a couple of corners, and Barrichello in 12th position with the Jordan. There we see Damon being very bullish about it.
Well, I think the signals coming from Barrichello were invisible, but they were still there. He wasn't going to give Damon Hill a hard time. He got caught again in the situation where one of the two Williams got through before the chicane. You can't literally just stop on the track and say, okay, go through, Damon. He did his best. It cost Damon Hill maybe half a second, but that will be closed down again by the time they reach the end of the straight.
There we see Ayrton Senna just to put a lap on last year's winner, Gerhard Berger, the man in 5th position. So everybody up to Berger will then be lapped, and Gerhard, well, how cooperative would he be?
They were teammates for 3 years. He's not going to fool around that much. He might tweak his tail a bit. That's Gerhard's nature. But he's not going to do something that is deliberately going to inflict a punishment on Senna for those 3 years by costing him time in his lead over Alain Prost.
Actually, Gerhard's lap times, John, are not that much slower than Ayrton Senna's at the moment. Senna's doing 17.8. Gerhard did a 1:17.9 on that previous lap, so we had a look through the top 12.
But it's going to be at the end of the straight that Senna will look for some cooperation from Gerhard Berger. Whether he'll get it now, that's we're going to wait and see. There's certainly too much of a gap for Senna to do anything about it. And remember that his McLaren was slower down the straight this morning by, well, it was some 4 miles an hour. Again, doesn't sound a great deal, but it prevented the gap being reduced.
Well, Ayrton closing the gap on this part of the circuit, but as soon as we put the power down, like you can see here, we see Berger running away from him.
Well, Senna again very late on the brakes and trying to get on the throttle very early to use any braking advantage he might have. And Gerhardt, I think, with an oil flag there being shown, I think that's more to do with the accident we saw from later. There may be debris on the circuit, bits of bodywork, and certainly a bit of gravel and lots of dust and dirt. Well, Gerhardt, looking in his mirror, you can see as his head bends over to the left, he can, out of his peripheral vision, see that Senna is on his tail. He's just sort of playing around a little bit. He's not doing something that is deliberate to slow Senna down. And Senna now closer as they come on to Jones Straight. And I think by the time the end of Brabham Straight arises, he's going to be in position.
He's getting his hand out of the cockpit, John. Senna was, like Gerhardt, you see?
Yep, the hand's out there. I think the gesture was something more than just waving a finger. Well, Gerhardt stayed way over to the left. He had his bit of fun and games for the day. He certainly tweaked the tail, not just of Senna, but of McLaren, Williams, Bennett, and everybody else in the pit lane yesterday afternoon when he ran 18 laps in a session where only 12 are permitted. The penalty was a loss of times from the Saturday session, but of course, as it was a hot session and nobody had gone quicker, but Damon Hill certainly showing more than just his nose to teammate Alain Prost. That was the first indication that Damon Hill is getting fed up following his teammate. Maybe Damon thinks he might have a chance, not just of winning this Grand Prix, but confirming his place second in the 1993 World Championship for drivers.
Well, if it stays the same, he's not going to get that, and also he's got to finish basically ahead of Ayrton to secure that. Damon running over the curves there, going into that chicane with 17 laps to go in this Australian Grand Prix. Well, Alain Prost is not going to let Damon Hill pass, is he? Also, John, I think the last 17 laps of this Grand Prix, this is also the sort of time you get in for mechanical failures.
It's at this point of the race, everything is fatigued, particularly things like brakes. They get very, very hot indeed. There's a lot of heavy braking here. Certainly in many cars carried more brake cooling, particularly to the rear of the cars, than we might see in other circuits. But I just wonder now, looking at what's going on here, Ayrton Senna leading the race. He's got a comfortable 20-second lead. He has got second place in the championship at this point under control. Do you think that Williams, for example, might decide that, well, Prost really has done the best he's going to do? Should we allow Damon the opportunity to see if by being allowed to take second place from Prost, he has the possibility to hunt down Senna and try and win this Grand Prix? It's a strategy I'm sure the Williams team have thought about. I'm sure it's one that the McLaren team have thought about. They right now, I suspect, are delighted that Alain Prost is running in second place.
And just had a new fastest lap, which is then being battered by Damon Hill, a 1:15.966 and a 1:15.914. So that's a new lap record for Damon. And I think Damon is showing that he's just as quick as Prost under these circumstances here today, and I think that he's a worthy driver for the Williams team for 1994 alongside Ayrton Senna.
I think it's going to be a very strong team indeed, and with Senna moving over to Williams, the assumption is that he is going to be very dominant. He tends to be so wherever he is. But the change within Damon Hill from South Africa some 16 Grand Prix ago to here in Adelaide has been extremely good indeed.
Now we see Senna crossing the line for the 64th time, a 16.6, and he is now the tail of both LaRousse, Lamborghinis, and well, he wants some cooperation from those two. 15.4 and 15.3. We see exactly the same. Alain Prost better in Damon Hill's time to a 1:15.454, and then Damon Hill immediately 0.8 of a second behind, but it's a 1:15.381. What might be a bit more important is that they're over a second faster than Ayrton Senna, who now is being held up by the LaRousse of, well, I know who's LaRousse that is, Tomac, Suzuki, sorry.
Well, this is the last time we're going to see the Chrysler V12 engines It appears that after negotiations with McLaren that were broken, that options for Chrysler and Formula One were not available, and it's a great shame, because certainly when McLaren did do testing at a number of circuits with that engine, it did perform very, very well indeed, and particularly it was in a mule car. It wasn't even in a car specifically designed around it. But in the meantime, the gap now, well, it was 18 seconds. We wait to see what it is. I suspect it's down closer to 15 and a half or 16 seconds. The combination of the speed of the two Williams plus the traffic that Senna got trapped in, 15.6 seconds.
Derek Warwick there in battle with Mark Blundell. Warwick offline, left, right and centre. And don't follow Andrea de Cesaris, please. Let us see what happens behind that, where Derek Warwick and Mark Blundell are in a really good fight.
Well, they were squabbling hand over fist. And Derek Warwick, the man who was in the sickbed all day Friday, he came here Saturday, had only one day of running and qualification. He then had a very, very disrupted night on Saturday night, up most of the evening being unwell, and driving yet again with the guts and commitment, which has been the hallmark, really, of his Grand Prix career.
Exactly, the man is very strong and committed. And is this going to be Derek Warwick's last Grand Prix? That's what the big question is. I mean, so for a lot of drivers, of course, because there's not very many people who've got a definite place yet.
Now problems again. 3 cars ahead for Senna. Oh! Mark Blundell well over the curbs. Well, he has to say, Senna will say, thanks Mark a bunch. That's made my life an awful lot easier. I didn't lose time getting past you. Don't be so generous to the two Williams.
All powered by the same engine, incidentally. So, Senna is now behind Derek Warwick, and the gap is down to 14.1 seconds, and that is Senna leading Prost, of course. Well, there's Andrea de Cesaris in front of Derek Warwick, and Derek's been very cooperative all through this race, but now he's got a... Oh, that is very nice, Derek.
Yes, it was. That was a gesture, and a very fine gesture, a gentlemanly one from Derek Warwick. He could have slid underneath de Cesaris, who's got an engine lacking a number of cylinders, and now Senna very, very cautious indeed. Oh, and understandably so. The unpredictability of de Cesaris. It looked, to all intents and purposes, that he was going to allow Senna to go through the inside. At the last minute, he just shut the door. Senna anticipated it. He was off the throttle. Those are moments late in a Grand Prix. You think everything's done and dusted. Well, that could have seen the race leader done and dusted as well.
11 seconds is the gap between Senna and Prost. It's coming down rapidly now. 2.5 seconds again. And there's Warwick stuck behind de Cesaris now. De Cesaris, I'm not sure whether the engine's actually running on 9 cylinders or whether it's an exhaust that's gone.
It probably is an exhaust pipe. When an exhaust breaks, the primary pipe breaks up at the cylinder head, and it just sounds awful. Engine loses power, but the actual exhaust note makes it sound like it's something more serious. But this is the traffic that Alain Prost and Damon Hill are going to be confronted with within the next 12 or so seconds. In fact, you can see they're just about to come onto the straight in tandem, Prost and Damon Hill, and all this battling going on. Gerhard Berger, Derek Warwick, de Cesaris, who's laps down, Mark Blundell and Damon Hill showing. Oh no, Damon, what have you done?
Damon Hill has spun.
Damon he didn't know whether to commit himself totally and go forward or whether to back off. It was the caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. Now he's got problems both not selecting gears but also making sure he doesn't get caught by traffic. He went in, he was on the brakes as he turned in. The back end, of course, unloaded, no power, the pendulum effect. Let's watch it again. He's had to hit the brakes really hard to avoid making contact to Alain Prost, and as I say, the pendulum effect took over. Disappointment, frustration, anger, everything from Damon Hill. Still in third place, but now 21 seconds behind Alain Prost.
Well, and he's got a clear road, so let's see whether Damon can actually run very much faster. And it is now 37 seconds behind Ayrton Senna, so I don't think that is going to be an option for Damon. But for the first time in 12 laps, Ayrton Senna has increased the lead over Alain Prost.
Well, that's what this
Prost
maneuver.
overshot the corner.
He did overshoot it slightly, but again he just came across. Damon didn't have a lot of room, and again, by turning into the corner off the throttle, he really ought to have been on the power at that point. The way to the rear of the car, once that momentum begins, it just continues. The tyre loses adhesion, and the days when you could control the slide like that really disappeared with active ride cars and these flat-bottomed aerodynamic packages.
So Damon Hill a long way behind, and Prost losing more time to Ayrton Senna, who is well on his way to his 41st Grand Prix victory and his 5th of the 1992 Grand Prix season. And don't know, where do we see? That means that it's going to be victory number 104 for McLaren, and they're the winningest team in Formula 1 then.
Well, that was one of the greatest secrets that we had kept from Eurosport listeners. In fact, that in Japan, Ferrari and McLaren equaled in terms of Grand Prix victories since the World Championship was introduced in the late 40s, and an outstanding achievement for the McLaren team. And as they go on and establish a new record, will Ron Dennis become the latter-day Enzo Ferrari? Will he become, in effect, a legend in his own lifetime?
We see the positions after 69 laps. Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost and Damon Hill now a long way behind. Senna, fastest lap for him each lap in this race, and the gap now back up to 15.7 seconds. There we see the position 7 to 12, and the battle in the background is that for 10th position between Derek Warwick and Mark Blundell. That's been a very entertaining battle, to say the least.
I suspect that in fact as this Grand Prix progresses, Derek Warwick is feeling better and better. He's feeling stronger and stronger. He will have been sweating out all the toxins, all the things that he's been laid up with, and as that is dissipated, you feel better and better. And there's nothing stronger to cure a driver of ills than a massive dose of adrenaline, and believe me, Warwick and Blundell are getting that treatment.
Senna on his way back to the hairpin for the 71st time, and then he will cross the line at the end of lap 71, and we are still keeping an eye on his lap times. He had to overtake a car. I don't know whether it's cost him any time, a 16.601, so I suppose that should not have cost him that much. With 8 laps to go, I think Ayrton is pretty safe if he's not going to be let down by his car.
Well, this has been to date an absolutely superb performance from Senna. He used his full position to effect, although Prost was very, very quick off the mark, but sufficient was the advantage that Senna had into that first chicane. He retained the advantage of pole position, and then we saw a battle of strategy between the two teams and who would make one pit stop. I'm sure McLaren believed that Williams were going to try and go through with only one stop. What Williams thought McLaren were going to do, well, we have to wait and see.
There's Aguri Suzuki and Riccardo Patrese. They're battling for 8th position, and Riccardo and Aguri. Funny, because both could well be in their last Grand Prix, John.
Well, Aguri Suzuki, one doesn't know yet whether he will remain a part of Footwork team or whether that is not going to be the case. Certainly, I know that with the move from Footwork to Lotus of the Mugen engine, Aguri Suzuki was at one point keen to follow the engine to the Lotus team, but Lotus have made it clear that they are retaining Johnny Herbert and have signed Pedro Lamy for the 94 season, so no options with Honda Mugen at Lotus for Aguri Suzuki. Riccardo Patrese again, his future's uncertain. His name has been mentioned in connection with touring car racing in Germany and Great Britain with Alfa Romeo. I have to say, if I was a current Grand Prix driver as good and entertaining as touring car racing is, wouldn't be for me at this particular point.
Senna 15 seconds in hand over Alain Prost, and it's Hill, Alesi, Berger and Brundle. So that's the people that are going to score points here today. So far, Martin Brundle, the point for Ligier is a very good point he's going to score for Ligier. They get 23 points, and they are very close to the mark set out earlier in the year when Cyril Deroux took over and said, well, we want to score a lot of points, and I think 23 is way more than the team scored in the last couple of years together.
I would like to think that the contribution to that, apart from the fine work done by Renault and Elf, who provided the fuel, was the driving of Mark Blundell and Martin Brundle, two British drivers who have got, particularly in the case of Martin Brundle, enormous experience, and with Mark, of course, all his testing time at McLaren with the Honda engine was, I believe, significant for Ligier. But interestingly also, Allard, we've got 15 runners still in this Grand Prix. Last year, 13 made it to the finish. So I would say, in fact, that in the last 2 years, the finishing record has actually been higher than formerly here in Adelaide. And that's an indication that just high a standard of reliability teams are attaining, not just at the front with people like Williams and McLaren, but all the way down through the field.
Watching Damon Hill, who will finish in third place when the race is 1 hour and 37 minutes underway, and we've got 5.5 laps to go. So that race is actually a race, very much a faster race than last year, when we finished in 1 hour and 46 minutes, just nearly 1 hour 47 minutes, to be honest. Damon will finish his first full Grand Prix season, I suppose, in third place, which is not bad at all.
But he will be disappointed. He came here with the hope of defeating Senna and taking second place to partner his team leader, Alain Prost, to make it a Williams 1-2 in the championship. But it has been a fine season, fine debut season in reality for Damon Hill, and of course now in 1994 all that experience of every Grand Prix circuit can be used, and the emergence of Damon Hill as a man in his own right, as a Grand Prix driver in his own right, has become very clear since around the Canadian and French Grand Prix, and the challenge, the pressure that he applied to Alain Prost here was fairly intense. I'm sure Prost did not enjoy it very much. He much preferred, in my view, to have not had that attention all around him from his own teammate, and really just to focus ahead of him and try and reduce the gap that he had to race leader Senna.
Senna and Prost running near identical lap times at the moment, and we're on lap 76 out of 79, so there's 3.5 laps to go in this Grand Prix, and Wendlinger doing exactly the same as teammate JJ Leto did earlier in the race, going straight on at the first chicane.
Well, I wonder if both cars got the same problem. It looks like it could have been a braking problem. Certainly Wendlinger much later in the race, unfortunately not as extreme as his teammate JJ Leto was. And well, I've said before, brakes do get punished here. This is Sauber's first visit to Australia, and nothing beats experience when it comes to Grand Prix racing.
Exactly. That moves Mark Blundell up to 9th position, Derek Warwick up to 10th, and Rubens Barrichello up to 11th. But Senna still leading. We're at the end of lap 76, and he's now got Jean Alesi in his sights with 3 laps to go. Alain Prost some 13 seconds behind, so I don't think anything's going to happen.
Who would have thought that when Jean Alesi had that absolutely blinding Grand Prix debut at Paul Ricard in 1989 that we would have seen Jean Alesi still waiting for his first Grand Prix victory. He said this is his third season at Ferrari. He had all the potential, and one might begin to question the judgment in the case of staying at Ferrari for that length of time, and as he compounded that judgment by staying for at least one more year and possibly two.
Ayrton Senna nearly completed lap 77 here, past Jean Alesi, fairly easy. And although, I must say, John, talking about Alesi and Ferrari, they are making progress.
Indeed they are, but, you know, 3 years of a driver's life is 3 years. Alesi, had he been at McLaren or Williams, as he could have been certainly for 1991, could have been world champion, could have won 12, 15 or more Grand Prix.
Well, I'd say you win some, you lose some. Thank you. So, Ayrton Senna, he's won 40 until this race. He's on his way of winning his 41st Grand Prix, and in only 158 Formula One races. I mean, that is remarkable, John.
Well, one thing I think is pretty clear, that next year he's not going to stop winning, because he's going to have this car, the car Alain Prost is vacating, and at present it is a permanent vacation. Alain Prost is going to become, for the first time probably in his life, a normal human being.
Well, Toshio Suzuki is in 13th position, 15th position, but still going round, and he's done more laps than I think he would have thought he would.
Well, of course, Toshio Suzuki's big battle is going to come next weekend back at Suzuka in Formula 3000, the final round of the Japanese Championship. And another man that's going to be there will be Eddie Irvine, who is in contention for that championship. So it's back to the bread and butter of motor racing, and another battle in Suzuka.
On his final lap is Ayrton Senna, the man from Sao Paulo, 3 times world champion. He is on his way to Grand Prix victory number 41. And this is the best farewell present he could give to the team, John.
Indeed it is, and it's been an absolutely outstanding, superb, all the superlatives for Senna. He has driven masterfully throughout the weekend. He secured pole position in his terms, a blinding lap. Sunday, Saturday, of course, conditions were somewhat slower. And what a way to end a fantastic association with the team, really, that, well, I wonder what his emotions will be right now. I'm sure there'll be more than just a tear in his eye. Alain Prost takes second place in his final Grand Prix.
Well, and Alain, I wonder what's going through his mind now, because that is the last time he's seen a checkered flag in the Formula One car.
Well, this is what he has said, and as we said on Saturday's broadcast, there are the usual skeptics in pit lane who think that maybe he might be persuaded. Certainly there is enough people out there to try and persuade him to continue with his motor racing, but there's a man who really does deserve the applause of this Australian crowd. He has driven, I think, one of the finest Grand Prix I've ever seen him drive. He never at any point put a wheel wrong, and there
he looks Brazilian.
I was going to say, is he looking Brazilian or not? But certainly the Brazilian flag, and Senna justifiably delighted with his effort, and McLaren likewise have battled all through 1993. They had a dip in the Middle European season, particularly on the faster circuits, where they seemed to struggle to find the right balance of aerodynamics over speed. But as is inevitable with the McLaren team, they put their heads down, they get on with the job, and they recovered, and they've won the final 2 Grand Prix of 1993. I have to say, against a car which in my mind still is quicker.
So, Ayrton Senna, Grand Prix victory, number 41. Alain Prost finished second. Then Damon Hill third. And Damon Hill finishes third in the Drivers' World Championship. And this man, Ayrton Senna, finishes second. Damon Hill did get fastest lap here, a new lap record, a 1:15.381. It's Jean Alesi in fourth, Gerhard Berger in fifth.
Well, I think he might have switched the traction control off for that little maneuver, and that is just an example of the joy that Senna is feeling. And Damon Hill, I think, has tried to do something similar, but not maybe quite so successfully. And I don't know what Damon is actually attempting to do down at the end of the Brabham Straight, but I think he might have finally stalled his engine, and he's looking to be pushed back. Maybe he just isn't able to select reverse gear.
He's given his sponsor some coverage there.
Well, there's no better way to give them a sponsor the coverage than to win a Grand Prix. And there the crowd appreciative of a Grand Prix which maybe didn't produce action at the front, but there was always the sense that something could happen. Traffic, of course, here in Adelaide, again playing a significant part in the outcome of a race. Decisions on tyres kept very closely guarded secrets by all the teams, and Senna's joy mounting as he comes down pit lane. And well, there will be an almighty celebration tonight with Ayrton Senna, Ron Dennis, the entire McLaren team, and well, 6 years of partnership. And it has been a partnership in which at times there's been strong differences of opinion. The two toughest guys I've ever met in motor racing are Ron Dennis and Senna. It's like the difference between a rock and a hard place. And now I wonder, will there be an acknowledgement from Alain Prost to Ayrton Senna, or are they going to continue the differences they have?
I wonder what he's thinking at the moment.
Well, Ron Dennis, the first man to get to Senna, and there will be a genuine sadness that this partnership is over. And I wonder whether if they could put the clock back 3 months and say, well, am I doing the right thing, Ron? Do you think so? Or Ron might say to Ayrton, are you sure you've done the right thing, Ayrton? You know, you said we'll meet again next year. And Alain Prost, undoubtedly disappointed that his final Grand Prix did not end on the winner's podium, looking around the back of the car.
Very lonely.
Yes, he is. He is indeed.
On his own, thinking about his very last Formula One race. Alain Prost, Le Professeur, and there is an emotional Ayrton Senna. Well, Damon's being pushed into the garage. I think he finally stalled that engine, actually.
Yep, it looked like it down at the hairpin bend at the end of Brabham Straight. Well, it's all part of an education for Damon. He certainly indicated at three-quarter distance that he was capable of running quicker than Alain. And I just wonder maybe that, well, Ron Dennis walking over and saying well done to his former employee, a man that won 3 championships in fact for the McLaren team, 2 with the Tag Turbo and 1 with the Honda V12, and still distance between Senna and Prost as they stand in this garage. I wonder, well, Damon comes over and says well done, and finally, well done. A small acknowledgement between these two great men.
More than the head of lane.
It is. It was almost inevitable. One could not pass the other without saying well done. And Joe Ramirez, a man who's worked throughout Senna's career at McLaren, and Joe Ramirez from Mexico, who worked years and years ago back in sports car racing with the Gulf Porsche team, and with particular Pedro Rodriguez, another Mexican, a great driver. And the bond, a very strong bond from those two Latin Americans. And there we see Goodyear taking the final information there, peeling away all the debris that was picked up. The engineers getting the tire temperatures such as they are. Of course, the cars in the slowing down lap would have lost considerable temperature, and now all the Brazilian fans and the few Brazilians that live in Australia saluting their man, Ayrton Senna. There are the cheers for Senna, and also merci Alain. The 13 fabulous years from Monsieur Prost, and well, the future for Grand Prix racing in the third place, Damon Hill, who will be partner instead of next year at Williams. It's going to be very interesting to see Senna when he gets his first opportunity to drive for the team that beat him in this year's championship, his impressions of a very, very sophisticated piece of equipment indeed.
Ten times the rostrum finish for Damon Hill this year. Look at this, a happy family.
Yes, I'm delighted to see, and I'm sure at the end of the day the acrimony and differences of opinion that surrounded Senna and Prost really from 1988, it might be forgotten in generosity from both drivers, from Senna as the victor here this afternoon, to Alain and his career, and as Alain as the 1993 world champion and bowing out of Grand Prix racing, to the man that really he has battled with for so many years.
I mean, although they have their differences, John, we said it earlier, there is respect. There must be respect between.
Yes, there is, and there's a signal from Senna. He's finally allowing himself the gesture now of saying, thank you, Alain. You've given me 6 very memorable seasons of Grand Prix racing, and now the Mur Chandon is going to be sprayed, and the journalists and Senna and Prost continue the battle. Damon Hill getting into it, and now finally the champagne being sprayed over the thousands that are at the foot of the winner's podium.
No, he's got to get back that way.
And now the familiar Senna waterfall. He lifts the Imperial of Moet Chandon above his head, pours it over himself.
They're the top 3 on the rostrum. A physical, hard race for Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost and Damon Hill. And a good way to finish off the season, I suppose.
Well,